welcome, and thanks all for coming out to hear our esteemed panel here. Our topic today is going digital, and when we first talked about this topic, we thought, okay, this could have been a topic we were talking about 15 or 20 years ago. But we all who have been through some form of digital journey and or has been a disruptor in industries that were going through digital change, all recognize that this is an evolution. It's not necessarily, we've arrived and everything is digitized and everything has changed via some kind of digital transformation. And so what we'd like to do today is explore where each of our panelists see either their industries or their companies in terms of their own digital journey. What has really prompted the digital journey they've been on, and what have they learned from that? And then after we have our panelists do that, we'll talk to them about what they see next. So what I'll ask each panelist to do as we go through here is introduce themselves and then describe a little bit about where they are in their own digital transformation. So let me start out by asking Marc to introduce himself and jump in here.
Thanks, David. So I'm Marc Frons. I'm the Global Chief Technology Officer of News Corp, which is the owner of Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal, Realtor.com, Move here on the West Coast, and News Australia. It's a big multinational media company. My digital journey, I guess, started about a little over 25 years ago when I was a technology editor at Business Week and kept writing about this new thing called the World Wide Web, and eventually got so enthused with the possibilities for digital journalism that I started a website called smartmoney.com, where I was first the editor, but realized that technology and journalism were intertwined, so became the switched to the technology side and had a bit of a tech background, but have spent the last 20 years at big media companies helping them sort of take the journey to go digital, from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal and here at the rest of News Corp. And I would say the main thing that I've found is there's a big cultural shift that has to happen for companies to go digital. It goes beyond strategy. There's almost a belief that this new medium means a whole set of new behaviors, new ways of doing things, new business models that companies need to adopt and sort of let go of the fear of their old businesses. In media, and especially where I go, newspapers were still the dominant revenue stream, and actually, surprisingly, you'd be surprised to hear, are still the dominant revenue stream at the Wall Street Journal, at the New York Times, at many other media companies. But that is changing very rapidly. So it involves a whole new set of behaviors that need to be mastered, and it isn't an easy journey, but it's one that all companies, I think, have got to be on.
And when you think about News Corp, if you were to think about how far along are you in this digital journey? Are you 40% of the way there, 80% of the way there? Where would you?
I would say we're about halfway there.
Okay.
The other half is really about raising the level of all of our digital products to the real best in class. I mean, we look at Amazon as sort of the best in class for identity and user experience. And so what I've said is, there's a lot of creativity you can bring to the journalism, but if you don't provide a user experience for people that is equal or better than the best in the business, you're going to be disintermediated and lose out to those companies. The other part is recognizing, as other companies have, the digital platforms like Facebook and Google in particular, is the importance of data and how we use that. In traditional media companies and traditional companies in general, most of the data ends up on the cutting room floor, and that's just totally unacceptable. So there's a big education process around how do we use data, how do we master identity globally, how do we bring that to bear to have the best experience and know more about our users so that we can deliver the best advertising experiences to them, help them subscribe to our products and stay subscribers, or monetize them in other ways.
Great. Thank you, Marc. Ira.
Ira Rubenstein. I'm the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer at PBS. I'd say my digital journey started as a child playing on the Play-Doh computer system, controlled data in Minnesota. And I built some of the first digital marketing in Hollywood before the web, and built some of the first websites, and then moved on and did some of the first streaming and media buying, and then putting movies on cell phones, on the old Java Brew phones in Europe, as well as gaming and other things. And then from there, film and TV. Studios went to Marvel and launched digital comics and figuring out what a digital comic product might look like. And now moving on to PBS, I would say that I think for everywhere I've been, the message has always been that digital isn't something special, and it isn't something secret or hard, and that it shouldn't be, well, those guys over there in that corner are doing it, and that every group within the organization has to embrace it and figure it out with the help of a digital thought leader or a digital group within that larger organization. And case in point for PBS, most recently, one of our products is PBS Passport, which if you're a member of your local station, you gain access to a library of content. Well, that required working with the development people and the pledge people and all these people who are probably the least digital within the organization, but then helping to bring this product and this platform that they could then use it to drive membership and revenue for their stations. And just in the last year since it's launched, we've seen about $15 million of new revenue to stations. We have over 1 million people activated in the account. And the interesting thing is that the average age of a Passport user is about 20 years younger than your typical PBS member who probably still watching the pledge shows.
What percent of consumers of your content would you say are accessing the content digitally today versus traditional means?
It depends on the demographic. So if you're a child and PBS Kids, I would say you're right now at about 65% traditional over the air and 35% digital channels. We're expecting within 2 years that to be 50-50, given the trend lines for the kids. In the adult general audience, that's your Masterpiece, your Nova, your Natures. Nathanson had an article, he did a little slideshow at Code where he said, people who are 55 and over are still watching TV like 1979. That's kind of our audience up in those age. So I would say it's much different there. And so that, I would say, is probably 80-20. But again, it depends. I mean, we have very large streaming events. Ken Burns' Vietnam series was a very large streaming event. I believe it was 33 million streams. So it's all kind of depends in there.
So still a long way to go, sounds
It's
like.
still a long way to go,
Yeah.
at least in our core demographic and that older demographic, not in the kids.
Great. And Paul, I turn you the mic, and I don't know if you want to share about your own company or maybe some other experiences that you've had in other industries.
I'll just talk about the context a little bit. And first of all, I can tell Ira and PBS are digital companies because you have PBS digital socks on. So when you got the socks, you know you're digital.
My marketing.
Anyway, so I think digital is, we came out in 2013 and we made a statement with part of the vision, technology vision we produced, where we said every business is a digital business. And it was interesting, the reaction at the time, because I spent most of that year in 2013 fighting with CEOs and C-suite executives who said that wasn't their industry, like that was about media companies or something else. And it was striking how fast that mindset shifted, and everybody did say, well, yeah, it is, every business is a digital business, and this is a pervasive thing. It's not just about music or media or publishing or telephony or whatever it might be. It's impacting every business. And at the same time we did that, I guess that's where we started changing our business as a result. So and I think going digital has become a hard thing to talk about because I don't think digital's a thing or a destination anymore. And one of the one of the statements that I use is there is no finish line for this era that we're in. It's about continual innovation using ever-changing technology. Now it's artificial intelligence and new things coming in. So going digital, to me, really isn't a destination of we can check it off and say, I'm done, I'm a digital company. It's about creating a different sort of company with no finish line that embeds continuous innovation in everything you do and how you operate your customer and how you deal with, how you operate your company and how you deal with customers. So what that's meant for us is, and what we started in 2013 was reinventing our business because we realized we weren't fit for purpose and ready for that age of continual innovation. If you would have looked at Accenture, if you know our industry or our business back in 2010 era, you would have thought of us as a big industrialized systems integration delivery company because that's what we did. And we would have probably said we're a fast follower, which is what our strategy was. Let's wait for technology to mature and then we'll follow. And we realized that in this era of going digital, which meant continuous innovation, we needed to be an early mover and first mover rather than a fast follower. So we started reinventing a lot of new capability. So we increased our investment in R&D to about $700 to $800 million a year to in new labs and new research and innovation capability to develop new products and services for our customers faster. We developed something we call our innovation architecture, which is how we go from research to results and drive revenue with the research that we're doing. And we created new capabilities that we thought would need. One of the gaps we saw when we looked at our business back then is we said, we're going to need the ability to help our clients envision the digital future. And we didn't really have an interactive part of our business. We created Accenture Interactive as a customer experience and advertising and interactive agency. And that didn't exist 5 years ago, and it's now, we just were named the #1 digital agency by Ad Age. And that's on the basis of a lot of acquisitions, which was the other part of our strategy. We acquired 100 companies in the last 3.5 years and spent about $3.5 billion on acquisitions to bring in new capabilities to fill in the gaps that we saw that we needed to provide to help our clients make that digital transformation. So that's what our journeys look like. We think the next decade is really about increasing pace of innovation, and not just for us, but in any industry, you need to stay ahead of what your competition is doing if you want to be the digital leader.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you talk about both. You need to understand where and how your industry is evolving, and then how you need to evolve with it. But the steps you take to get there, whether it's changing leadership, whether it's acquiring digitally enabled, businesses that can really help you on that journey. I think there's different ways to get there, but certainly new DNA and a different way of thinking around continuous innovation. So,
that's our view on these acquisitions was really important. We had a strategy we called tuck-in. We weren't looking for big acquisitions driving revenue or into our business. We were looking for tuck-ins that helped us change the DNA of Accenture. So we bought Fjord, which was the leading experience design agency, a few years ago, and that they infected and infused Accenture with this this different mindset and this different approach. The kitchens and their offices around where they create which is intrinsic to the culture. We expanded. We didn't shut down their facilities, which is sometimes what you do when you acquire companies. We expanded their offices and used those to infuse different aspects of that digital culture into Accenture. So that was all part of what we did.
And it's also interesting that each of our companies probably have something inside our companies we call digital today. And to your earlier point that if every company is digital, how long will that last in terms of us having a digital entity when our whole business should be transformed digitally, which would take me to my next question, which would be, when you look out into the future, where do you see the biggest opportunities in going digital, and what are the enablers and or challenges in getting there? And I'll leave it up to you as to how you think about the enablers in terms of technology or big other macro trends that may be impacting your industry. But Marc,
Sure.
How do you think about that?
So I think it starts by saying that all companies are technology companies now, and so what we've tried to do at News Corp is instill that we have to have a technology culture and an engineering culture in our company. It is great to acquire new companies, but as Paul said, it's wonderful when they infect or you have positive feedback from them. All too often, the big company ends up sort of crushing the little company. So you have to make sure your company is culturally ready to accept these sorts of these new startups that many of us buy or work with. The thing we're working on at News Corp is helping our disparate brands understand that they're all connected, and that we have a global audience of over 300 million people, actually closer to 400 million, and yet if they're still disconnected and we don't have a platform, the analogy I often make is Facebook doesn't have Facebook Romania and different login, different technology. It's all a single platform. Certainly there's other sort of instances and where they sell advertising, but most non-digital companies are very fragmented. And so our challenge is to bring those pieces together and help our companies understand that if we want to innovate quickly, we have to do that from a basis of strength in the underlying platforms that we build. So the journey that I think we're going on now is one of coordination and consolidation along many of our digital properties, where we're looking at identity as a global opportunity, content APIs, machine learning as a global opportunity, and not just within one brand and in one part of the company. I think it's a combination also of looking at very advanced technologies like blockchain, and then saying, let's focus on basic block and tackling as well in terms of how do we take advantage of all these innovations and innovate quickly.
I mean, it's an interesting point you make about how you harness the power of these new technologies and how you can bring those, bring those into your company. There are you're probably, or when I think about this, relying on others to help you innovate through that process where you yourself don't have the engineering breadth and depth to be able to.
Like every company, it's a combination of working with great outside partners, startups to established companies, and helping them make the most of the technology they have, but also developing the internal capability so you're not just integrating software packages like enterprise technology teams did in the old days, but really beginning to understand how to develop new products on their own, leveraging all the great innovation that's happening here in Silicon Valley and elsewhere in the world.
Great, thank you. Ira.
So I think for public media and PBS, in thinking about future technologies, it's really about, for us, future content. What does public media content mean in the YouTube age, in the YouTube generation? Any of you have children under 18, that's what they're watching. So how do you create content for that platform and still serve the public media mission? And we do some experimenting with that. We have a PBS Digital Studios. It averages over 40 million views a month. We've done 1 billion lifetime views. And that's exactly what we're doing. There are shows that you look at it and go, oh, that looks like a PBS show to me, but it's on YouTube. And then taking that a step further, you start thinking about voice and voice interaction. And what is public media content on voice beyond NPR? And we're two separate companies, but podcasts. Should we be doing podcasts? And Frontline, our award-winning investigative journalism, is exactly doing that. They're creating content specifically as a podcast. It's not just an audio, recording of the show you might watch. It's just very specific, created for that format. And that's what we work with all of our producers in creating content for the format. So there's content that we're making for Facebook, or VR content that we're making with a Nova or a Nature, that's specific to the format, because as people's consumption patterns change with these, the many devices, for us to remain relevant, we have to bring this high quality content to that platform, and at the same time, bring the local stations along to teach them how to produce it, create it, and then tie in that relationship to the consumer. From a personal standpoint, what I'm most excited about looking towards the future is augmented reality. I just think that's just incredible. I'm not such a big believer in the VR side of things, but the AR side, I think, is really going to be a game changer. And I have a friend who said he compared VR to the old mobile Java brew phones. And he said AR is like what you're carrying your phone today, the smartphone. And I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface of that. and AI. I think that's going to be really exciting. I don't know what it means for public media, but we'll get there.
It's an interesting perspective around trying to evolve from not just the way in which the content is distributed from the traditional means through digital platforms, but creating for digital content. I think one of the challenges has been how to monetize that, and I think obviously we have Jeffrey Katzenberg thinking about building this or making a huge investment in short form content in a mobile first context. But do you see that the economics are ultimately going to follow, or how do you see that?
Well, actually, that's where I see we have a blessing. It's in our DNA to be crowdsource funded.
Okay.
It's in the DNA of your local station. You get support for the content from the people who consume it.
Right.
And they understand that this is public media. So we don't rely heavily on advertising. We do have some sponsorship, but I worry about the companies who rely heavily on advertising because the platforms that they have to build to compete with the Googles and the Facebook is significant and challenging and hard. And
Sure.
I mean, you touched on it.
No, I mean that's why we see ourselves as a global audience. If we don't treat ourselves as a platform against the platforms, then we can't win.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think quality journalism, quality content will win out. What we've seen with all the fake news and Russian interference in the election is that the platforms have a lot of problems, and quality publications have a role. And we've seen, whether it's the Trump effect or whatever, subscriptions to our subscription properties are up 30-40% over the last year. So that's a very good sign.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're fortunate with news at PBS. Because it goes along with our brand. We do a trust survey every year. We're the #1 most trusted brand in media. And, again, getting back to your question about monetization, to me, it's harder actually to tie the local station branding to the content on these platforms than the monetization. Because if I can tie the station and people's association that this content's coming from that, then I can get the monetization later. But that is getting harder and harder to do on these bigger and bigger platforms that distribute the content.
Sure. So I'll leave, Paul, you the final word on the prognostication for where the greatest opportunity is and the most important technologies.
Yeah, I'll try to do it quickly. I agree with everything Marc and Ira just said. That those are the technologies and the directions of the future. I'll take a different take, I guess, in terms of the impact, which is we think we're moving into a very different era with technology and what digital means. And technology and digital has meant kind of a device, so to speak. So screens, phones, different types of devices that people access. Our kids look at screens 8.5 hours a day, which is good, being in the business you're in. You all touch your phones 2,617 times a day, according to the most recent survey, many of the times in this room. And what that means is technology isn't a peripheral, it's becoming the heart of how we experience our lives and how we work. And I think that's got profound implications for companies in terms of our strategies. And so technology becoming the heart of the human experience means as a company, it's not just about the product you put out there, but your differentiation is going to be getting better data from a customer, or getting your customer to use your product more during the day, or getting more invasive information or intrinsic information on their lifestyle, behavior, work habits. So in that world, trust becomes a differentiator. So this fake news, the platforms become really important because we believe trust is one of the biggest differentiators in the next stage of where we're going in the digital world. And then the technologies like blockchain and all these things we talk about are means to develop and improve that trust. And I think that's going to be the landscape on which we compete when you look, the next 3, 5, 10 years.
Great, thank you very much. I think we're out of time. And